Greeting ladies and gentlemen, we are Group 4, and today we are going to discuss whether casino gambling should be morally permissible, based on 3 of our own ethical arguments to support our stance. Before we jump into conclusion, let me briefly tell you what casino gambling is all about. Gambling is defined as an act in which people bet money with a chance of winning money. Moreover, gambling manipulates human nature by making the person pay to have an exciting feeling, by taking risk.
There are many casinos all over the world, 2 of the most famous places which is Las Vegas and Macau, and there have 136 and 41 casinos respectively. Some examples of casino gambling include blackjack, free card poker, as well as craps, mostly a game of chance that require randomizing devices such as dice or a deck of cards. Although it may seem so fun, for our ethical stance, our group believes that casino gambling should not be morally permissible. We will discuss our ethical arguments based on utilitarianism, human punishment, and deontology.
Hi everyone, I'm Sandra. Let's move the part to ethical argument 1, utilitarianism. So, what is utilitarianism? The basic principle of utilitarianism is the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. There are 3 key points in utilitarianism. First is it will produce the best overall results. Second is it pays attention to human welfare to satisfy people's material needs. It is also called material satisfaction. Third one is everyone's welfare is equally important. After we know what utilitarianism is, we can get a formula through the principles of utility. Benefits such as material satisfaction plus pressure such as spiritual satisfaction, and then minus pain such as material and spiritual is equal to the consequences. Obviously, utilitarianism comes close to what we know as cost-based benefit analysis. So, why is casino gambling bad in terms of utilitarianism? From the aspect to teleological in orientation, the motive decides the act and the act decides the consequences. For example, gamblers gamble in order to earn a lot of money, and through gambling they can achieve their dreams or achieve other things. That is motive. So they take some actions to gamble, such as go to gambling sites, quarrel with their family because of different opinions. That is the act. Consequences are divided into 2 aspects. One is the ideal aspect and another is the reality aspect. The ideal aspect is the gambler thinks they can get a lot out of money. The reality aspect is the gambler gambles again and again in order to recover his losses. The gamblers will be addicted to the gambling and spend all his entire savings. From we have learned about the principle of utility, we can conclude that the morally best or better alternative is that it produces the greatest or greater net utility, where utility is defined in terms of happiness or pleasure. We ought to do what produces the greatest amount of happiness or pleasure for the greatest number of people. For example, perhaps gambling is a pleasure to the gambler and that pleasure can be quantified, but to ordinary people or the gambler's family, gambling may cause their anger or worry instead of happiness. This is a picture of a man who is addicted to the gambling. His family is worried about him. His daughter and son say, "Father, please don't go to gambling again, please." Maybe we feel impossible, but the gamblers can donate their entire savings to the gambling sites. From this picture, we can know a man can donate all his money, watches, and car keys to the gambling. So let's move Kelly to introduce the next part. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Sandra. I'm Kelly. Let me talk about gambling's good points and bad points. Such as gambling can exercise our brain. When you are stimulated, your brain secretes a neurotransmitter called dopamine, which is also released when you smoke or drink alcohol. But there's a downside to this pleasure, which is addiction. Because when the person receives dopamine starts to gamble, the person starts to gamble more, as the person needs more dopamine. At last, the person becomes a gambling addict. Aside from addiction, it can cause different problems at the same time, such as destroying their future, depression from losing money, and bankruptcy. It's not just the gambler themselves who are hurt, but their family as well. Now, let me introduce the way of calculating utilitarianism. In the last table, we can see 9 advantage and 13 disadvantage of the number of disadvantage are more than advantage, so it will be less fruitful. Therefore, if something has more good points than bad points, then it will be considered fruitful. If the opposite, it will be considered less fruitful. Next, let me introduce factor in calculating utilitarianism, which is intensity. In the scale, we can see number 1 is representative of the least happiness. Then, number 10 is representative of the most happiness. There are 2 plans, for example. In plan A, there is 3 card poker, but only give one person the most happiness. But the other 2 people both get the least happiness, because only one person can win in the gambling. Contrary, in plan B, when looking for a job, it can give 3 people moderate happiness because they can all find a job at the same time. So, finally, we can see plan B will get more happiness than plan A, because casino gambling will provide fewer units of happiness in terms of intensity. Okay, that's what I share. Now, let me pass to Joy to introduce another way of calculating utilitarianism.
Hi, I'm Joy. I'm going to show you another 2 calculating processes of the greatest amount of happiness, duration and likelihood. And I will do some comparisons between casino gambling and having a job. For duration, each unit of happiness is 1 unit. Here are 2 examples. Let's use crabs as an example. According to online research, for plan A, crabs usually gives 1 person happiness in the long run, while other 7 people are unhappy in the long run. For plan B, all the 8 people will be happy in the long run if they find jobs. So, after calculating, the outcome of plan A is that crabs brought people -6 units of happiness, and in plan B, getting a job brought people 8 units of happiness. Obviously, casino gambling tends to provide less happiness in terms of duration. Moving to next slide. Likelihood is one of the factors of affecting the amount of happiness. According to some investigation, each gambler has a 44% to win, but a 46% chance to lose when it comes to blackjack. In plan A, blackjack gives 1 person 44 odds once a day of intense happiness. Meanwhile, it also offers 4 people a 46% chance to lose with negative happiness. In plan B, 5 people have 96% chance of having occupations. Thus, in plan A, there are -1.4 units of happiness. In plan B, there are 4.8 units of happiness. There are many metrics. We can see that again, casino gambling brings people few units of happiness in all metrics used. So, after all these calculations, on the side of utilitarianism, gambling is not morally permissible.
Now we move to the second argument, human punishment. First, let me introduce what is punishment. It has 2 justifications. First, we will talk about backward-looking approaches of punishment. Then, we will focus on the forward-looking justifications of punishment. Meanwhile, we also consider some other issues about punishment and use some data and evidence to prove it. Also, we will introduce the theory about the sanctity of life in capital punishment. I made a diagram of the main content. For the backward-looking, we are going to see the lex talionis. We divide it into two parts. Why do we punish and how much do we punish? Deontology and equivalent proportionality will be the two important parts we will investigate. For the forward-looking, we are going to see the consequentialist. Deterrence, rehabilitation, and reconciliation and healing will be the focus. Now we are going to our argument's main part. Why casino gambling is bad in terms of human punishment. Let's see some data about casino gambling. Since 2019, the National Public Security organs have investigated and dealt with 234,000 gambling cases. According to the pie chart, among them, only for commercial use, not for serious criminals, it's about 70%. 26% of gambling involves serious legal liability and is sentenced to more than 2 years in prison. About 4% participants just involve in private gambling, only for fine. Now we are going to see some casino gamblings in different areas in China. First, in mainland China. Mainland has very strict requirements for casino gamblings. No casinos can be opened in any place, let alone gambling by the masses. However, there are still a lot of people involved in small-scale gambling activities. Second, in Hong Kong. Gambling is much easier in Hong Kong than in mainland. The Hong Kong Jockey Club is the only agency that allowed legal gambling activities like horse racing, lotteries. Since 2003, the Jockey Club has been approved to conduct the football talent lottery and major football events outside Hong Kong.
Last is in China, Macau. Actually, since 1847, casino gambling is legal because the government has issued relevant decrees. As a result of the foundation laid before, the gambling industry has become an important part of Macau's economic income, attracting tourists from all over the world. Moreover, the Macau government has also made it clear that government can decide relevant policies on its own. From this data, we can see that Macau is the only place in China where gambling is not restricted and legal completely. And there are two types of punishment, backward-looking approaches of punishment and forward-looking justification of punishment. About backward-looking, deontology is associated with gambling. Casino gambling is something that people can choose freely. Everyone should take responsibility for their behavior. And from the punishment about gambling, we can see the law is justice, and it is a good way to make perpetrators know the effect for themselves and society. Finally, their membership of the community is restricted. So how much should we punish? The answer is equivalent proportionality. It means that penalty must be made in some way that is equivalent to the crime or harm done, which means that casino gambling may cause different crimes and harm to others. For example, they may not have enough money to support themselves because they are addicted to gambling. In order to keep their life better and continue to gamble, they may choose to misappropriate company funds, threaten and intimidate, or even killing people. According to the principle of equivalent proportionality, they should receive equal punishment. Another type of punishment is forward-looking justification of punishment. Deterrence as the goal of punishment, and there are two effects can be achieved. One is specific deterrence. which means deterring the criminal from committing the crime again in the future. And the other is general or indirect deterrence, which means deterring others in the society from committing similar crimes. We can imagine that if it is only a small gamble, which does not involve commerce or constitute a crime, it is usually punished by detention for several days, which is to remind criminals not to commit a crime in the future. But if there's a serious legal problem, it is not just a 3 days. There will be a lot of fines and years of penalties. In this case, deterring others in the society from committing similar crimes.
I'm going to show you the last two parts of forward-looking justification of punishment. They are rehabilitation, reconciliation, and healing. In addition, I will also introduce the theory of sanctity of life in capital punishment. Just like the laws of Hong Kong, any person who gambles in a casino commits an offense. The goal of rehabilitation punishment is to provide knowledge and skills necessary for participants to work effectively in the area of problem gambling. This includes the identification, screening, and assessment of problem gamblers and their families, as well as the development of appropriate and effective rehabilitation approaches. The prevention objective of this punishment is to provide participants with the necessary knowledge and skills to develop and conduct public awareness and prevention activities on problem gambling. Next, I will talk about reconciliation and healing, and explain how it works as part of punishment. Gambling usually serves some function in a person's life. Some people gamble for excitement, while others gamble to escape from stress, depression, and boredom. You will probably find that it is easier to stay away from gambling if you can get involved in more healthy activities. Counselor champions build counselor knowledge and skills in developing and implementing actions to reduce harm from gambling. They will encourage people to initiate and implement actions to raise awareness of or reduce harm from gambling. Local government has influence and levers that extend widely across the community and different modes of gambling. Finally, I will explain the connection between the sanctity of life and capital punishment. There is no death penalty for gambling, no matter what the circumstances, and death penalty will not be imposed. Refer to the criminal laws, punishment provisions on gambling crime, and the crime of opening a casino. We can see that whoever gathers people to gamble or gamble for the purpose of making profits shall be sentenced to fixed-term imprisonment of not more than 3 years. Gambling does not directly or indirectly harm other people's lives. Life is sacred. We should respect it and cherish our lives, because everyone's life is only once.
Mush.
Hey Joe, it's Angela. So I got some ideas for the anthology.
Naruhodo.
Yup, I have this video and it's basically about deontology, so have a look.
Deontology. Deontology is an ethical theory that uses rules to distinguish right from wrong. It is often associated with philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kant believed that ethical actions follow universal moral laws, such as don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat. Deontology is simple to apply. It just requires that people follow the rules and do their duty. This approach tends to fit well with our natural intuition about what is or isn't ethical. Unlike consequentialism, which judges actions by their results, deontology doesn't require weighing the costs and benefits of a situation. This avoids subjectivity and uncertainty because you only have to follow set rules. Despite its strengths, rigidly following deontology can produce results that many people find unacceptable. For example, suppose you're a software engineer and learn that a nuclear missile is about to launch that might start a war. You can hack the network and cancel the launch, but it's against your professional code of ethics to break into any software system without permission. And it's a form of lying and cheating. Deontology advises not to violate these rules. However, in letting the missile launch, thousands of people will die. So, following the rules makes deontology easy to apply. But it also means disregarding the possible consequences of our actions when determining what is right and what is wrong.
Okay, so based on this video, deontology is basically based on the features of an act, such as the motive and the nature, so that people, based on this motive and nature, they follow the rules and do their duties in order to be as rational and autonomous as possible. And therefore, based on their motives and their own act and their own natures, they're just acting out of duty. So you get it, bro.
Naruhodo.
Okay, do you have anything in mind though?
Oh, hello there. My name is Johannes Leandro Canlas Pilate, and today I will be explaining why casino gambling should not be morally permissible, according to the principles of deontology, as stated by Immanuel Kant, with the motive being greed. To start off, we need to define what is greed. Greed, as defined by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is a selfish and excessive desire for more of something than is needed. Now that we know the definition, let's see whether greed holds up under Kant's principles. Considering that the motivation should be considered a right motive or a right intention, greed does not fit that category, as a person who is greedy can never stop wanting more and more. Therefore, the motive cannot be permissible under deontology. The next thing we need to know is the nature of casino gambling. Considering that the nature of casino gambling is not according to duty, or that the person in gambling is not obliged to gamble, this makes the nature also not permissible under deontology. That's some fine whiskey cold. The final thing we need to consider are the categorical imperatives. The first form of categorical imperative would be the maxim of the person performing the act. I assume that the gambler whose main motive is greed would have a maxim which sounds a bit like this. If I gamble, I have a chance to win more money, even though the odds are against me. This maxim is not ethical because the maxim is mainly focused on self-interest, which is rather greedy. Considering that in most cases where greed is motivated by self-interest, it leads to an outcome which can cause a unnecessary suffering or feelings of inequality to those affected by greedy individuals. Therefore, it is self-defeating. Greed is an inherent human trait. It was essential for survival before the establishment of civilizations, and it can still be useful in cases where it causes the least human suffering. But for this case of self-interest, it would cause more suffering for the individual and those individuals being affected by greed. The second form of categorical imperative is whether others or yourself is being used in the act. Considering that gamblers' winnings are often other people's property, therefore you can consider it using others. Moreover, casinos also manipulate gamblers into gambling more using very subtle methods. An example would be not having any clocks or any windows so that customers cannot tell the time, as well as giving out free coupons or reducing the prices of services such as buffets, shows, or any other service a casino offers, which may tempt the weak-minded into making them gamble even more. Therefore, the person who is gambling is using others as well as being used. In conclusion, gambling with greed as a motivation is not morally permissible under deontology, as it is not the right motive or intention. The nature of casino gambling is not according to duty of the person, and the person also is not obliged to gamble, and that the maxim is self-defeating. Moreover, the person who is gambling is using others and is being reused respectively. Now that's over, I need to find better cover. Cheerio, lads.
Thank you, Joe. My name is Angela, and I'm going to talk about the other motive from the concept of deontology: to solve financial needs. There's a saying about money that is, money isn't everything, but everything needs money. Now riddle me this. Why does everything need money? Indeed, in this materialistic society, money is the answer to everything, only materialistically speaking. In Hong Kong, each person earns between $20K per year and around $200K per year. And we spend around $1,000 per day. So including the needs of, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like self-actualization, self-esteem, love, safety, physiological needs, and even buying Wi-Fi. Therefore, some people might need some money, extra money, to satisfy all these financial problems as their motives. And that is why people gamble their ways out to help themselves financially by either getting money face-to-face or playing with machines in casinos. But I personally do not recommend gambling in casinos, as there are more ethical means to get money, like finding a job perhaps. Indeed, some people need those extra money from casinos to support their families. That is part of their nature, and that is why they try to gamble their ways out. For example, there are a lot of traditional family values, such as filial piety, which depends on the family members for economic production. And as for the younger generation, one of the ways to show their love and respect for their parents is to support them financially. Therefore, as family members, they bear such massive financial responsibility because of these values about respecting their families. However, in Hong Kong, the poverty rate was 20.4% back in 2019. So that number of people suffering from poverty might want to gamble in casinos to get that extra money in order not to disrespect their families, which is not a morally good thing. Because like I said, there are other ways to provide financial support for their families, like receiving subsidies from the government. So, based on the motive and the nature, here comes the maxim. If I gamble, I have the chance to win money in order to support myself and my family. This maxim might sound positive, but I'm here to say that it is in fact a very self-defeating statement. Because here's the thing, if everyone gambles simply for family issues, there could be only one winner. And the maxim of that winner is valid because they can actually win money to support their families. But for the rest of them, these guys, sadly, they cannot fulfill their maxims because they lose their money to that particular winner. And the more times they lose, the more money they lose. And at that very point, they won't have the money to support their families because all the money they bet on is all gone. Moreover, casino gambling can cause a downward spiral between the gamblers and their families. Take a look at this picture and allow me to give an example. If the gambler actually wins money, they will gamble more to help support their families, which is the denial phase. So they focus on gambling too much to the fact that they spend less time with their families, which is the stress phase. And then here comes the exhaustion phase. Family members, especially their spouses, will eventually rage against the gambler for not spending quality time with them. So, in the end, here comes the final blow. Helplessness, hopelessness, mental breakdown, substance abuse, divorce, suicidal thoughts, and attempts, which leads to separation from family members. Well, a lot of money can support themselves and families, but during this example, you may think otherwise, as money cannot support themselves and families psychologically, which then leads to not supporting financially. So, once a family is broken, who will gamblers support with so much money? No one. I want you to look at this graph and see that casino gambling sometimes and even often cause negative impacts among siblings, children, parents, and partners. And in worst case scenario, there's also domestic violence between the families because of casino gambling. In terms of the second form of categorical imperative, both gamblers and other people will be used as instruments. Let's talk about other people for a second. That's easier. Once the gamblers lose money and don't have enough money to pay the winner, they may ask other people, like their family members, friends, partners, in order to pay their debts. Therefore, other people are dehumanized as merely objects that have the money to help, instead of real human beings who have their problems on their own. Take a look at this example. According to a news report in 2018, more than 100,000 British students are in debt because of casino gambling. So, students would lie to their families and friends after losing money, which resulted in dropping out of university, or even jails, waiting for their parents to bail them out simply because they lost several £1,000s. Therefore, this proves that other people are used as money objects instead of gambling. In fact, the gamblers themselves will also be used as well, especially when they lose to the winners. They need to spend a lot of time in order to pay back the money they lost by many means. How so? Let's look at this real-life case study for a moment. A man lost his money between 20,000 to 25,000 pounds and had to take 8 to 10 years to pay them back to the winner of the game. How does he pay the money back? Well, the poor man has no family holidays, no adventure days out, no real enjoyment, only have to go to work, be at home, take the kids when they can't afford it. This man treats himself as a working machine instead of a human being. You can totally imagine the guilt this unfortunate man has to deal with. In conclusion, gambling with financial needs may seem decent in some ways, but under deontology, it is not morally permissible because it doesn't fully have the right motive or nature, and hence not fully acting out of duty. Moreover, the maxim itself is self-defeating and both other people and gamblers themselves have to suffer from being instruments to their own bad consequences.
And in conclusion, we concluded that casino gambling should not be morally permissible according to the utilitarian principle. The principle refers to a satisfaction or a happiness to the gambler. However, it can increase their frustrations towards their families and friends, as it can cause addiction, which leads to severe losses, as a gambler could be in debt. Also, no matter if a gambler wins and loses, he would still want to play. A, because if he wins, he will have that motivation and encouragement that he can win again. And B, if he loses, he will gamble again with the hope of winning and recovering for his previous losses. Moreover, casino gambling has more disadvantages than advantages. There are only 9 advantages, however, there are 13 disadvantages in terms of fruitfulness. And in terms of intensity, duration, and likelihood, we gave some examples where plans showed that employment was greater than gambling. It could be seen that from all 4 perspectives, the amount of happiness was less. Overall, casino gambling doesn't give the greatest amount of happiness, and that's why we talked about why it should not be morally permissible.
I'm Sharuksar, and I will be presenting the second half of the conclusion. In our project, we also covered the human punishment involved in gambling. There are 3 types of gambling, and they all have consequences, namely the commercial gambling with no legal actions, illegal gambling that leads to 2 years of imprisonment, and private gambling that leads to fines. It is easier to gamble in Hong Kong than it is in China, as there are no casinos in China, while Macau has a big gambling industry. We also covered the 2 types of justifications. The first one is backward-looking justifications, which is based on the level of crime, while the forward-looking justification punishment is based on deterrence, rehabilitation, and reconciliation and healing. Finally, we covered deontology, which has 2 aspects, greed and financial needs. When a person gambles for greed, they are in hope to win more money or bet on people's properties. And those who gamble for financial needs want to win more money to support their basic needs and families. They consider others and themselves as objects. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you so much.